The bitter wind howled with fury as Olivia Armstrong's body tumbled through the air, a scream tearing from her throat before she plunged into the deep snowbank below. The Pacific Express continued its relentless journey westward, smoke billowing against the darkening sky, oblivious to the woman it had just lost. No whistle blew, no brake screeched. The train simply pressed on, swallowed by the growing blizzard as if Olivia had never existed at all. Garrett Evans saw it happen from the ridge above. He'd been tracking the train's path from a distance, riding parallel on his buckskin mare, planning to catch up at the next station. Through the swirling snow, he caught the unmistakable sight of someone being forced from the rear platform. A flash of burgundy fabric against white snow, then gone. "Whoa, Penny," he murmured, pulling his horse to a halt. He squinted through the storm, wondering if his eyes had deceived him. The train's distant rumble faded as it rounded the bend, and Garrett sat frozen, gloved hand shielding his eyes from the stinging snow. Then he saw it movement in the distant drift. Someone was alive down there. "Come on, girl," he urged his mare forward, turning away from his intended path and into the teeth of the storm. "Someone needs our help." The year was 1876, and winter in Nevada's high country showed no mercy to those caught unprepared. Garrett knew this territory well, had spent 5 years ranging across its mountains and valleys. But even he wondered if he'd made a fatal mistake as the wind picked up, driving ice crystals like needles against his face. Still, he pressed on, following the faint impression where the woman had fallen. When he finally reached the spot, he found only a deep depression in the snow. Panic seized him until he spotted the trail someone had dragged themselves away from the impact site, leaving a broken path through the drifts. "Hello," he called, voice nearly lost in the howling wind. "Can you hear me?" 20 yards further he found her. A woman in a burgundy traveling dress, half buried in snow, trying desperately to crawl toward a stand of pines for shelter. Her gloves were gone, fingers blue with cold. Her golden brown hair had come loose from its pins, whipping wildly around her face. Garrett dismounted in an instant, sinking knee-deep in snow as he rushed to her side. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open amber brown and filled with fear. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. "Don't try to talk," Garrett said, immediately shrugging out of his heavy buffalo coat and wrapping it around her. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe." The woman's body was alarmingly cold as he lifted her onto Penny's back. She seemed to weigh almost nothing in his arms. He mounted behind her, cradling her against his chest as he turned the horse back into the wind. "My cabin's not far," he said close to her ear, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "Just hold on." Her head lolled against his shoulder as consciousness slipped away from her. Garrett felt a surge of desperation. He knew the signs of freezing to death had seen good men lost to mountain winters. He urged Penny faster, one arm tight around the woman's waist. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Just stay with me." The storm intensified, transforming the familiar landscape into a bewildering white void. Garrett relied on instinct more than sight, trusting his mare to find the path home. When the dark outline of his cabin finally materialized through the blizzard, he nearly wept with relief. He carried the woman inside, her body dangerously still. The cabin was cold, the fire long dead, but it was shelter from the wind. Working quickly, Garrett laid her on his bed and built up the fire, his fingers clumsy with cold and worry. As flames began to lick at the kindling, he returned to the unconscious woman. Her face was deathly pale, lips tinged blue. He knew what had to be done, had seen it done for frostbite victims before. Without hesitation, he began removing her sodden clothing, replacing it with his own dry shirts and blankets. He rubbed her hands and feet vigorously, trying to restore circulation without damaging frozen skin. "Come on," he whispered, working tirelessly. "Fight." Hours passed. The storm raged outside while Garrett maintained his vigil, adding wood to the fire until the cabin grew almost uncomfortably warm. He made broth from dried meat and herbs, spooning tiny amounts between her lips whenever she seemed close to consciousness. It was near midnight when her eyes finally opened properly, focusing on his face with confusion. "Where?" Her voice was barely audible, raspy from cold and disuse. "You're safe," Garrett said, relief flooding through him. "My cabin about 5 miles from where you fell from the train." Memory flooded her face, followed swiftly by terror. She tried to sit up but fell back with a gasp of pain. "Easy now," he cautioned. "You took quite a fall." "They pushed me," she whispered, eyes wide. "They tried to kill me." Garrett's body tensed. "Who did?" "Men, hired by my uncle." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "I overheard them. They were supposed to make it look like an accident. Your uncle wants you dead." Garrett handed her a cup of water, helping her sit up enough to drink. She nodded, wincing at the movement. "Olivia Armstrong died 3 months ago, leaving everything to me instead of his brother. Uncle Theodore didn't take it well." "You're Olivia Armstrong," recognition dawned on Garrett's face. "The mining heiress," her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "How do you know who I am?" "Everyone in Carson City knows the Armstrong name, madam. Your father's silver mines employ half the men in the territory." He sat back, giving her space. "I'm Garrett Evans. I run cattle on the North Range in summer, trap in winter. Was heading to town when I saw you fall." Olivia studied him, taking in his weathered face, the dark beard flecked with premature gray, eyes the color of a summer sky. He was younger than she first thought, perhaps 30, with the lean, hard build of a man who lived by his own strength. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Evans." "Garrett," he corrected gently. "And you should rest. We're snowed in for now, but you're safe here." "They'll come looking," she whispered, fear returning, "when they realize I'm not dead." Garrett moved to the window, pushing aside the hide covering to look out at the raging blizzard. "Not in this, they won't. Storm's the worst I've seen in years. By the time it clears, your trail will be long gone." He turned back to her. "For now, you need to heal." She nodded, exhaustion claiming her again. "I need to reach Carson City. I have papers, proof of what Theodore is doing." "We'll get you there," Garrett promised, "when you're stronger and the weather breaks." Olivia's eyes closed, her breathing growing more regular. Garrett watched her for a moment, troubled by this unexpected turn of events. He'd planned a simple trip to town for supplies before the heavy snows came. Instead, he'd found himself harboring the territory's wealthiest woman, apparently the target of a murder plot. He stoked the fire again and settled into his chair, rifle across his knees. If trouble came, he'd be ready. For 3 days, the blizzard showed no sign of relenting. The cabin, sturdy but small, became Olivia's entire world as she regained her strength. She learned that Garrett Evans was a man of few words but constant action. He tended her injuries with surprising gentleness, prepared simple but nourishing meals, and ventured out into the storm twice daily to care for Penny and check his snares. On the 4th morning, Olivia woke to find herself alone in the cabin. She rose carefully, testing her bruised body. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, and she found she could move without gasping. She was wearing one of Garrett's flannel shirts, the sleeves rolled up several times, and a pair of his woolen socks. The fire had been built up recently, and a pot of coffee simmered at its edge. Olivia poured herself a cup and moved to the window, pushing aside the covering as she'd seen Garrett do. The world outside was blindingly white, pristine and deadly. Snow had drifted halfway up the cabin wall, and the pine trees sagged under their frozen burden. As she watched, Garrett emerged from the small lean-to stable, carrying an armload of firewood. He trudged through snow that reached above his knees, face set in grim determination. When he entered, stomping snow from his boots, he stopped short at the sight of her standing by the window. "You're up," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I'm feeling much better," Olivia replied. "Thanks to your care," he nodded, moving to stack the wood beside the hearth. "Storm's starting to ease. Another day, maybe two, and we can try for Carson City." "How far is it?" 20 miles, give or take, but with these drifts, it'll be slow going." Olivia sipped her coffee, considering this. "My uncle's men will be watching the roads." "We won't take roads," Garrett said simply. "I know paths through these mountains that don't appear on any map." She studied him, questions forming. "You're not just a rancher, are you?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Did some scouting for the army after the war, learned the territory." He paused. "You want to tell me what your uncle's so afraid of?" Olivia sat at the small table, cradling her coffee cup. "He's been embezzling from the mines for years. My father suspected but couldn't prove it. When he died, I found evidence in his paper's ledgers, correspondence. I was taking them to the territorial judge in Carson City." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "The documents were in my valise on the train." "Along with everything else you had," Garrett noted. She nodded, a flash of despair crossing her face. "Without those papers, it's just my word against his. And Theodore has powerful friends." Garrett considered this as he removed his heavy coat and gloves. "We'll figure something out. First priority is keeping you alive." That evening, as they shared a simple supper of rabbit stew, Olivia asked the question that had been troubling her. "Why are you helping me?" "You're putting yourself at risk." Garrett was silent for a long moment, stirring his stew thoughtfully. "When I was 16, my father's ranch in Texas was taken by men who forged documents and bribed judges. My father fought it legally at first then." He shook his head. "They shot him in the street, called it self-defense." "I'm so sorry," Olivia said softly. "It was a long time ago." His eyes met hers across the table. "But I know what it's like when the people with money and power decide they want what's yours." The revelation created a new understanding between them. As they sat before the fire that night, Garrett opened up about his life, his years drifting after his father's death, the war, his decision to stake a claim in Nevada's wilderness. Olivia, in turn, spoke of growing up as the only child of a mining magnate, her mother's early death, and her determination to preserve her father's legacy. "He wanted the mines run fairly," she explained, watching the flames dance. "Good wages, safe conditions. Theodore thinks that's a waste of profits." "You could just walk away," Garrett suggested. "You have enough money to start over somewhere else." Olivia's chin lifted. "And abandon everyone who depends on Armstrong silver for their livelihood. Let my father's work be corrupted." She shook her head firmly. "I won't do that." Garrett nodded, respect evident in his eyes. "Then we'd better make sure you live to fight another day." The next morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. Garrett spent hours preparing for their journey, checking Penny's shoes, packing provisions, cleaning his rifle and revolver. Olivia insisted on helping despite his protests, mending a tear in his spare coat and organizing their meager supplies. "We'll leave at first light tomorrow," Garrett announced as evening approached. "Travel by day, find shelter at night. Should reach Carson City in 3 days if the weather holds." That night, a new tension filled the small cabin. Tomorrow would bring danger, and both were acutely aware that their brief sanctuary was coming to an end. "What will you do?" Olivia asked as they sat by the fire. "After this is over," Garrett shrugged, Come back here. Check my trap lines, same as always. Alone. His eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. It's what I know. Olivia looked away first. I've always been surrounded by people, yet often felt alone. Strange, isn't it? You can be isolated in your cabin and seem more connected to life than I've ever been. Different kinds of solitude, Garrett said softly. When morning came, they set out under a sky the color of polished steel. Olivia wore layers of Garrett's clothing, her slender frame nearly lost in his buckskin coat. They rode double on Penny, Olivia seated before Garrett, his arms around her as he guided the mare through towering snowdrifts. They followed game trails and narrow ravines, avoiding the main paths where possible. By midday, they had covered perhaps 5 miles, the going painfully slow but steady. Garrett remained vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, one hand never far from his revolver. There's an old line shack about 3 miles ahead, he said as the winter sun began its early descent. We can shelter there tonight. As they approached a narrow pass between rocky outcroppings, Penny suddenly tossed her head, nostrils flaring. Garrett instantly reined her in, his body tensing. Something's wrong. The shot came a moment later, the crack echoing off the surrounding cliffs. The bullet struck rock just above their heads, sending fragments flying. Down, Garrett shouted, pulling Olivia from the saddle and into the deep snow beside the trail. 2 more shots followed in quick succession as they scrambled for cover behind a fallen tree. How did they find us? Olivia gasped, heart pounding. Must have been watching the trails from high ground, Garrett muttered, pulling his rifle from its scabbard. Stay here. Where are you going? To even the odds. He peered carefully over the log, then pointed to a cleft in the rocks 20 yards away. When I start shooting, make for those rocks. Don't stop, don't look back. Before she could protest, Garrett had crawled away through the snow, using the contours of the land for cover. Olivia crouched behind the log, fear and cold making her tremble. Suddenly, rapid gunfire erupted from her left, Garrett creating a diversion. Without hesitation, she lunged to her feet and ran for the rock cleft, snow hampering her every step. Bullets kicked up snow around her, but she reached the shelter of the rocks unharmed, pressing herself into the narrow space. The exchange of gunfire continued for several minutes, then fell silent. Olivia held her breath, straining to hear any sound over the hammering of her heart. Olivia. Garrett's voice, low and urgent. She nearly collapsed with relief as he appeared at the mouth of the cleft. Are they gone? His face was grim. One is. Recognized him, one of the hired guns from the Silver Dollar Saloon. There were 2 others, but they pulled back when their friend went down. They'll come after us again, Olivia said. Garrett nodded. But now they'll be more cautious, and we have a head start. He extended his hand to her. We need to move fast. I know a different route, but it's rough country. The new path took them deep into the mountains, along treacherous slopes where a single misstep could mean disaster. Garrett led Penny, the footing too uncertain for riding. They walked for hours, the cold seeping through their layers despite the exertion. When they finally reached the line shack as darkness fell, both were exhausted. The crude shelter was little more than 4 walls and a roof, with a small stone fireplace and a single window covered with oilcloth. But it was sanctuary from the biting wind and potential pursuers. Garrett quickly built a fire while Olivia tended to Penny, giving the faithful mare extra grain from their supplies. When she returned, stamping snow from her boots, Garrett was heating beans and coffee. How did you learn to survive out here? She asked, warming her hands by the fire. Necessity, he replied, stirring the beans. First winter I nearly died, second winter I was smarter, and now you're sharing that wisdom with me. She accepted the tin cup of coffee he offered, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Seems only fair. You've shared your troubles with me." They ate in comfortable silence, the events of the day weighing heavily on both. After the meal, Garrett checked and reloaded his weapons, laying them within easy reach of the single bedroll he'd spread before the fire. "You should get some sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch first." Olivia looked at the bedroll, then back at him. "And where will you rest when it's your turn?" "I've slept on worse than a plank floor, madam." She shook her head. "It's big enough for both of us, and we'll both freeze otherwise." Garrett hesitated, propriety warring with practicality. "Miss Armstrong, after everything we've been through, I think you can call me Olivia." She smiled faintly. "And I promise not to compromise your virtue, Mr. Evans." A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "Wouldn't be much to compromise." Later, as Olivia slept beside him in the narrow bedroll, Garrett kept vigil by the dying fire. She had curled toward him in sleep, one hand resting lightly against his arm. Her face, relaxed in slumber, struck him with its quiet strength and beauty. He had lived alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone rely on him, to care about another person's welfare more than his own. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Dawn brought heavy clouds and the promise of more snow. They set out early, knowing that weather might soon make travel impossible again. Garrett had decided on a more direct route, calculating that the risk of encounter was outweighed by the danger of being caught in another blizzard. They rode together on Penny, making better time on the firmer ground of a game trail that wound through a dense pine forest. The closeness was a necessity, but brought its own complications. Garrett was acutely aware of Olivia's body pressed against his, the faint scent of wood smoke in her hair, the trust implicit in the way she leaned into him. By midday, light snow was falling again, the air growing colder with each passing hour. Garrett pushed on, determined to reach the next landmark, an abandoned trapper's cabin he knew lay ahead. "Your uncle's men," he said as they rode. "Would they have gone ahead to Carson City?" Olivia considered this. "Possibly. They might assume that's where I'm heading." "Then we need a different plan." He guided Penny around a fallen tree. "I know someone in Gold Hill, retired lawman. He might help us get word to the territorial judge without being seen. Can he be trusted with my life? And now yours." The snow intensified as afternoon waned, visibility decreasing with alarming speed. Garrett squinted into the white curtain, searching for familiar landmarks. "There," he finally said, pointing to a dark shape barely visible through the swirling snow. "The cabin." As they approached, however, Garrett tensed. Fresh tracks led to the cabin door and smoke curled from the chimney. "Someone's there," he whispered, immediately turning Penny away from the clearing and back into the shelter of the trees. They dismounted behind a thick stand of pines and Garrett drew his rifle. "Stay with Penny," he instructed. "If you hear shooting, take her and ride north. Follow the creek bed." "I'm not leaving you," Olivia protested. "This isn't a debate." His eyes were hard. "I need to know you're safe." Before she could argue further, he had disappeared into the snowy woods, moving like a ghost between the trees. Olivia stood with Penny, heart pounding as minutes stretched into what felt like hours. A twig snapped behind her. Olivia whirled, reaching for the revolver Garrett had insisted she carry. "It's just me," Garrett's voice came before she saw him. He emerged from the trees, snow dusting his shoulders. "Cabin's clear. It's Marshal Daniels, my friend from Gold Hill. He's on his way to Carson City, too." Relief flooded through her, followed swiftly by suspicion. "What's he doing here? In this cabin specifically? Same as us seeking shelter from the storm. He's tracking a gang that robbed the Silver City Bank last week." Garrett took Penny's reins. Says he's been holed up 2 days waiting for the weather to clear. Can we trust him? I'd trust Sam Daniels with anything. Garrett paused. But you don't have to. Your call, Olivia. She studied him, then nodded slowly. I trust your judgment. Marshal Sam Daniels proved to be a grizzled veteran of the frontier, with a silver mustache and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He welcomed them to the cabin with coffee already brewing and a stew simmering on the small stove. Garrett Evans, he said, clapping Garrett on the shoulder. Thought you'd be halfway to California by now, running from civilization. Not quite yet, Garrett replied with a faint smile. Sam, this is Olivia Armstrong. The marshal's eyebrows rose. Armstrong, Oliver's daughter, Olivia nodded warily. Madam, your uncle has men searching every trail between here and Carson City claiming you were kidnapped. His eyes narrowed. But that's not what happened, is it? Over the meal, Olivia explained the situation while Sam listened intently, asking occasional pointed questions. When she finished, the marshal sat back, stroking his mustache thoughtfully. Theodore Armstrong has half the county in his pocket, he said, including the sheriff, but Judge Hollister is a different matter. He can't be bought. That's why I need to reach him, Olivia said. With or without my father's papers. Sam exchanged a look with Garrett. Getting you into Carson City unseen won't be easy. Theodore's men are watching the roads and your description has been circulated. What if we don't try to hide her? Garrett suggested. What if we go in the front door, so to speak? Explain, Sam prompted. The winter carnival starts tomorrow in Carson City. Streets will be crowded. Everyone in their finest clothes wearing masks for the evening ball. Garrett looked at Olivia. We could walk right past Theodore's men. That might work, Sam agreed. I can get word to the judge, arrange a private meeting. He glanced out the window at the thickening snow. But we need to wait out this squall, probably clear by morning. As night fell, the three made plans by lamplight. Sam would ride ahead at first light, taking a different trail into town. Garrett and Olivia would follow several hours later, timing their arrival for the busiest part of the carnival. I'll secure rooms at the International Hotel, Sam said, under my name. The judge will meet us there at 8 tomorrow evening. Later, as Sam snored softly on his bedroll, Garrett and Olivia sat by the dying fire, voices low. Are you sure about this plan? She asked. It seems risky. Every option is risky, Garrett replied honestly. But hiding in these mountains indefinitely isn't a solution. You need to confront this situation head on. She nodded slowly. I'm afraid, she admitted. Not of dying exactly, but of failing, of letting down the people who depend on the mines. Fear isn't weakness, Olivia. It's just information telling you what matters. His hand found hers in the firelight. Use it. She turned her hand to clasp his, the simple touch conveying more than words could express. When this is over. Let's get through tomorrow first, Garrett said softly, though his eyes held promises neither was ready to voice. The morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. Sam departed at dawn, his horse breaking trail through fresh snow. Garrett and Olivia prepared more slowly, checking and rechecking their supplies and weapons. Carson City will be different, Olivia said as she helped Garrett saddle Penny. Once we're there, everything changes. How so? She gestured vaguely. This us. You'll go back to your mountains. I'll return to running the mines. Garrett tightened the cinch, not meeting her eyes. Is that what you want? Is that what you want? She countered. He finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. I want you safe. Beyond that, I haven't allowed myself to want anything in a very long time. The journey to Carson City took most of the day, following trails that gradually widened into proper roads. As they approached the outskirts of town, they began to pass other travelers' families in sleighs, riders bundled against the cold. all heading for the carnival. Carson City had transformed for the winter festival. Colorful bunting hung from buildings despite the cold, and the main street was lined with stalls selling food, drink, and carnival games. People thronged the boardwalks, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Garrett and Olivia left Penny at a livery stable on the edge of town, then joined the flow of pedestrians. Olivia kept her face partially hidden beneath the brim of a borrowed hat, while Garrett stayed close beside her, one hand never far from his revolver. The International Hotel stood at the center of town, a three-story building with elegant columns and large windows glowing with lamplight. They entered the busy lobby, where Sam was waiting as planned. "Room 212, he murmured as they passed. "Judge will be there at 8. Upstairs, the room proved to be a comfortable suite with 2 adjoining bedrooms. Sam had arranged for hot water, and a package lay on the bed containing a midnight blue gown and a feathered mask. "Courtesy of the judge's wife," Sam explained, "for tonight's masquerade ball, a ball." Olivia looked startled. "Best place to have a private conversation without arousing suspicion," Sam said. "Everyone who's anyone in the territory will be there, including your uncle, most likely." "Hiding in plain sight," Garrett mused. "Exactly." Sam checked his pocket watch. "I need to make rounds, maintain appearances. Be ready at 7:30. Garrett, there's evening clothes for you as well." When he'd gone, Olivia picked up the elegant gown, running her fingers over the fine fabric. "It's been a long time since I wore anything like this." Garrett, examining the formal suit with evident discomfort, snorted. "At least you know how to wear your costume. I'll look like a bear that wandered into a church." The transformation, when it came, was remarkable. Freshly bathed and shaved, with his dark hair neatly combed, Garrett cut a striking figure in the black suit. He tugged at the collar, clearly uncomfortable but undeniably handsome. When Olivia emerged from the adjoining room, however, all discomfort was forgotten. The midnight blue gown highlighted the golden tones of her skin and the amber in her eyes. Her hair had been arranged in an elegant knot with soft tendrils framing her face. "You look—" Garrett cleared his throat. "Different." A smile played at her lips. "Different good or different bad?" "Good," he said simply. "Very good." The hotel's grand ballroom was ablaze with light, crystal chandeliers reflecting off gilded mirrors and polished wood. Musicians played from a small stage while couples whirled across the dance floor in a swirl of color and movement. Nearly everyone wore masks, creating an atmosphere of mystery and possibility. Garrett and Olivia entered with their own masks in place, his a simple black domino, hers an elaborate creation of blue feathers and silver thread that concealed the upper half of her face. Sam had arranged for them to enter through a side door, avoiding the receiving line where names would be announced. "Judge Hollister will be wearing a red carnation," Garrett murmured close to her ear as they moved around the perimeter of the room. Sam said to watch for his signal. They stood near a potted palm, observing the crowd. Olivia scanned the dancers, then suddenly stiffened. "Theodore is here," she whispered, "by the punch bowl, with the gold waistcoat." Garrett followed her gaze to a portly man with mutton-chop whiskers, holding court among a circle of admirers. "Has he seen you?" "I don't think so. The mask helps, and he wouldn't expect me to be here." Her voice hardened. "He thinks I'm dead in a snowbank somewhere. Let's keep it that way for now." Garrett spotted Sam across the room, giving a subtle nod. "The judge is ready. Follow my lead." He offered his arm, and Olivia placed her gloved hand upon it. They moved smoothly onto the dance floor, joining the waltz in progress. Garrett surprised her with his competence, guiding her confidently through the steps. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, momentarily distracted from their mission. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My mother insisted, said no son of hers would grow up to be a complete savage. They made a gradual circuit of the room, eventually arriving near an alcove where a gray-haired gentleman with a red carnation stood examining a painting. As they passed, the man made a slight gesture toward a curtained doorway. "That's our cue," Garrett murmured, smoothly guiding Olivia in that direction. The door led to a small private dining room currently unoccupied. Judge Hollister followed a moment later, closing the door firmly behind him. "Miss Armstrong," he said, removing his mask, "I'm glad to see you alive." "There have been concerning rumors." "I imagine there have, Your Honor," Olivia replied, removing her own mask. "My uncle has been quite busy." For the next half hour she laid out her case, the embezzlement, the murder attempt, all of it. The judge listened intently, asking pointed questions that revealed his sharp legal mind. "Without your father's papers, it's your word against his," he noted. "And Theodore Armstrong has considerable influence." "But you believe me?" Olivia pressed. "I do," the judge sighed. "However, belief isn't evidence." "What if we could get Theodore to incriminate himself?" Garrett suggested. Both turned to look at him, and he continued. "He thinks Olivia is dead. What if she suddenly appears, confronts him here tonight? In his shock, he might reveal something." "Or he might simply deny everything," the judge countered. "Not if he believes I recovered the papers," Olivia said slowly, the plan taking shape in her mind. "If he thinks I have proof." "A dangerous bluff," Judge Hollister warned. "But one that might work," Garrett said. "I'll be right beside her." The judge considered, then nodded reluctantly. "Very well, but we'll need witnesses, reliable ones, beyond reproach." "I can arrange that," he added, rising. "Give me 15 minutes, then find your uncle." The west alcove would be ideal, more private, but still visible from the main floor. When he had gone, Olivia turned to Garrett, anxiety evident in her eyes despite her determined expression. "This could go very wrong," she said quietly. Garrett took her hands in his. "It could. But I won't let anything happen to you, Olivia, I promise." "It's not myself I'm worried about," she squeezed his hands. "These past days with you, they've meant more than I can say. Olivia." He hesitated, then pressed on. "When this is over, whatever happens tonight, I want a knock at the door," interrupted him. Sam entered, his expression grave. "Theodore's men just arrived," he reported. "3 of them, the same ones who have been searching for you, according to my sources." Olivia exchanged a glance with Garrett. "They might recognize you," she said. "You should stay back out of sight." "Not a chance," Garrett replied firmly. "I'm staying by your side." The next 15 minutes passed in tense preparation. The judge returned, confirming that he had positioned 2 respected businessmen and the mayor where they could overhear without being obvious. Sam would remain nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. Finally, it was time. Olivia replaced her mask, took a deep breath, and stepped back into the ballroom on Garrett's arm. Theodore Armstrong stood in the west alcove as planned, engaged in conversation with a silver-haired matron. When she departed, he found himself momentarily alone, the perfect opportunity. Olivia approached with steady steps, Garrett a reassuring presence beside her. When she was just a few feet away, she removed her mask. "Hello, Uncle." Theodore's reaction was everything they had hoped for. His face drained of color, eyes widening in shock as he took an involuntary step backward. "Olivia," he gasped. "But you're dead," she finished coolly. "Yes, that was the plan, wasn't it? A tragic accident on the Pacific Express." Theodore regained his composure quickly, though his hands trembled slightly as he clutched his champagne glass. "My dear niece, what nonsense is this? We've been searching for you. When you disappeared from the train after your men threw me from it," she interrupted. "Don't bother denying it, Uncle. I have Father's ledgers." It was a calculated risk. Theodore's eyes darted to Garrett, then back to Olivia. "I don't know what you think you found, but I found everything," Olivia pressed. "Every falsified report, every diverted shipment, every bribe paid to cover it up. Father knew what you were doing, Theodore. He just couldn't prove it until the end." Theodore's face flushed with anger. "Your father was a sentimental fool who couldn't see the opportunity in front of him. Those mines could have made us the wealthiest family west of the Mississippi, but he insisted on fair wages and safe conditions." He sneered the words. "You have any idea how much profit he sacrificed? So you decided to take what you thought should be yours," Olivia said. "It should have been mine," Theodore hissed, his voice rising. "I was the one with the head for business, not Oliver. And then he left everything to you, a woman who knows nothing about running mines." "I know enough not to steal from my own family," Olivia replied evenly. Theodore's expression darkened. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Those papers prove nothing." "They prove enough for a grand jury," Judge Hollister's voice came as he stepped forward, having heard every word. "Mr. Armstrong, I believe we need to continue this conversation at my office." Theodore's face contorted with rage as he realized the trap. His gaze locked on Olivia with pure hatred. "You little," he lunged suddenly, hands reaching for her throat. Garrett moved instantly, stepping between them and deflecting Theodore's attack with practiced ease. The older man stumbled, then reached inside his coat. "Gun!" Sam shouted, drawing his own weapon. Several women screamed as Theodore produced a small derringer. Before he could aim it, Garrett tackled him to the ground. The gun discharged harmlessly into the ceiling, bringing plaster raining down on the struggling men. Sam was there in an instant, wrenching the weapon from Theodore's grasp while Garrett pinned him to the floor. The ballroom erupted in chaos, guests fleeing toward the exits as the orchestra fell silent. "Theodore Armstrong, you're under arrest for attempted murder," Sam announced, producing handcuffs. As Theodore was led away, still shouting threats and accusations, Olivia stood perfectly still, the reality of what had just happened washing over her. Her uncle had tried to kill her again in front of dozens of witnesses. It was over. Garrett appeared at her side, his formal jacket torn at the shoulder. "Are you all right?" She nodded, suddenly exhausted. "Yes, thanks to you, again." The aftermath unfolded quickly. Theodore and his men were taken to jail, and Judge Hollister began formal proceedings that very night, taking statements while memories were fresh. By morning, the news had spread throughout Carson City: Theodore Armstrong arrested for embezzlement and attempted murder. The rightful heiress dramatically returned from the dead. Olivia spent hours with the judge and his clerk, detailing everything she remembered about her father's suspicions and the attack on the train. When she finally returned to the hotel, she found Garrett waiting in their suite, back in his regular clothes, preparing to leave. "You're going?" she asked, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. He nodded, not quite meeting her eyes. "Town's getting crowded with reporters, curious folks. Not really my element, I see." Olivia moved to the window, looking out at the street below where people gathered in small groups, no doubt discussing the scandal. "When will you return to your cabin?" "Thought I'd head out today. Weather's clear." A heavy silence fell between them, filled with all the things neither seemed able to say. Finally, Olivia turned to face him. "I never properly thanked you," she said, "for saving my life, for everything." "No need for thanks," Garrett replied gruffly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly, "not anyone, just you." He looked at her then, his expression softening. "Olivia, I understand that you need to go back to your mountains," she continued. "That's who you are, and I have responsibilities here now. The mines, the workers, everything Father built." She took a step toward him. "But I want you to know that these past days with you have changed me, changed how I see the world, changed what I want." Garrett remained still, watching her intently. "And what is it you want, Olivia Armstrong? A life that matters. Work that means something." She took another step closer. "And someone to share it with who understands both. Someone like a lone trapper with no prospects and a cabin 5 days' ride from anywhere." His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "Someone exactly like that." She closed the remaining distance between them. "Unless he doesn't want the complications of a mining heiress with a stubborn streak and no idea how to cook over an open fire." A slow smile spread across his face. "Those do sound like serious drawbacks." "Terrible," she agreed, smiling back. His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, lingering against her cheek. "I'm not a man who belongs in ballrooms and boardrooms, Olivia. I'm not asking you to be." She leaned into his touch. "But perhaps I could belong sometimes in a cabin in the mountains. And perhaps you could tolerate, occasionally, a proper bed in town. A compromise." His other arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. "A beginning," she corrected. When he kissed her, it felt like the culmination of everything that had happened since that moment in the snow, a promise, a sanctuary, a homecoming. Spring came early to Nevada that year. The snow retreated from the valleys, and wildflowers carpeted the meadows where Garrett's cabin stood. The cabin itself had changed, expanded with a new room. The interior brightened with curtains and colorful quilts. A vegetable garden took shape behind the structure, and a pair of horses grazed in the newly fenced paddock. Garrett stood on the porch, watching the approach of a rider along the trail that was now well-traveled between his home and Carson City. Olivia rode confidently, her riding habit practical yet elegant, her face brightening when she saw him waiting. "You're early," he called as she dismounted. "The meeting with the investors ended sooner than expected," she replied, accepting his kiss as she climbed the steps. "They agreed to all our terms for the new shaft. Never doubted they would." He took her saddlebags, following her inside. "Not when facing the formidable Miss Armstrong. Mrs. Evans," she corrected with a smile. The simple gold band on her finger caught the light as she removed her gloves. 3 months married, and still the sight of it brought a sense of wonder to Garrett. Their arrangement had raised eyebrows in Carson City, the wealthy mine owner dividing her time between town and a remote cabin, married to a man who preferred tracking game to attending social functions. But it worked for them. Olivia managed the business affairs of Armstrong Silver with a firm and fair hand, instituting the reforms her father had envisioned. Garrett continued his solitary pursuits during her absences, occasionally guiding wealthy hunters or consulting with the army about remote territories. And for a week or two each month, they shared this life they had built together, far from society's eyes but rich in the things that mattered to them both. "Sam Daniels sends his regards," Olivia said, unpacking the provisions she'd brought. "Theodore's appeal was denied. He'll serve his full 20 years." Garrett nodded with satisfaction. Theodore's trial had been the sensation of the territory, but justice had prevailed. His accomplices had turned on him for reduced sentences, providing all the evidence needed for conviction. "And how is the house coming along?" he asked, referring to the construction underway on their property closer to town, a compromise between his need for solitude and her business responsibilities. "Roof goes on next week. We should be able to move in by summer." She paused, a mysterious smile playing at her lips. "Though we might need to add another room to the plans." Garrett looked up sharply from the coffee he was brewing. "Another room?" Olivia's hand drifted to her midsection, her expression soft. "For someone who'll be joining us around Christmas." For a moment, Garrett stood perfectly still, processing her words. Then he crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering her into his arms with a gentleness that belied his strength. "You're sure?" he whispered against her hair. She nodded, happy tears shining in her eyes. "Doctor Martin confirmed it yesterday." He kissed her then, pouring all his joy and wonder into the embrace. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted. "A family, a future worth fighting for." "Nor I," Olivia replied softly. "Not until a blizzard and a fall from a train led me to you." Outside, the wind carried the scent of pine and new growth through the open window. Inside, Garrett held Olivia close, marveling at how a moment of terrible danger had led to this life. They now shared one built on trust, respect, and a love that had begun in the harshest of conditions but flourished in the warmth of their commitment to each other. Their child would grow up knowing both worlds, the wilderness that had shaped Garrett's spirit and the community that had given Olivia her purpose. It would be a life rich in contrast and possibility, much like their own unlikely union. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Olivia leaned against Garrett's shoulder. "You ever think about how close we came to never finding each other?" she asked. "If you hadn't seen me fall." "I did see you," he replied simply. "That's what matters." The future stretched before them, as vast and promising as the western horizon, a future neither could have imagined when fate threw them together in a snowstorm, but one they now embraced with open hearts and hands firmly clasped together. In the years that followed, their family grew to include 2 sons and a daughter, all with Olivia's quick mind and Garrett's quiet strength. The Armstrong mines prospered under joint management, with Garrett eventually overseeing operations that employed hundreds. Their home became known for its hospitality, welcoming everyone from business associates to passing travelers, much as Garrett's simple cabin had once sheltered a woman thrown suddenly into his path. And though society never quite understood the bond between the refined mine owner and the frontiersman who had saved her life, those who knew them best recognized a simple truth. Some connections, forged in the most desperate of circumstances, prove stronger than any conventional union could hope to be.